Hello and welcome to the Suzanne Atwell Show. I'm Suzanne Atwell. In this episode, one of the crown jewels in the Sarasota City Parks and Recreation Department, the Bobby Jones Golf Club. An historic legacy, a chronic financial liability, and an uncertain future. Like a lot of things in Sarasota, this once grande dame of the links ain't what she used to be. The original colonists in Sarasota hailed from Scotland. They came here in 1885 to settle in a development that was partially owned by the family of the man recognized as the father of our fair city, John Hamilton Gillespie. He was the city's first elected mayor when it was incorporated in 1902. Gillespie is also credited with introducing golf to Florida. He built 6 courses statewide, including our city's first, a 9-hole club located downtown near present-day Lynx Avenue. Just 3 years after Gillespie's death, the first 18-hole golf course in Sarasota opened, which takes us to Bobby Jones. Born in 1902, Robert Bobby Jones is one of the most important names in the history of golf. His Sarasota connection began in 1925 when the city's first 18-hole course opened. Now, the Sarah Bay Country Club. It originally opened as Whitfield Estates Country Club. During that same time period, looking for a place to build the city's first municipal course, the city of Sarasota bought 290 acres of private land from the Palmer Estate for a $150,000 bond issue. It was decided the new course would be named Bobby Jones. Nearly 100 years later, Bobby Jones and the city of Sarasota face some sobering facts. The course is in need of major repairs, the number of rounds played are decreasing, and competition from other courses in the area is stiff. In 2007, more than 140,000 rounds were played. Last year, just over 66,000 came out. Of those, only 9%, around 6,000, were city residents. Many say the decline is the result of course conditions and the city's lack of investment in much-needed drainage and irrigation. But in the past decade, the course has operated in the red. Most recently, the city subsidized the course with $650,000. During a 2018 meeting, City Manager Tom Barwin reported on an investment option to address the poor conditions and ongoing operating costs at Bobby Jones. Our interview with City Manager Tom Barwin is coming up, but first, we turn to a person who knows the history of Bobby Jones. Former business leader, mayor of the city of Sarasota, and head of the Argus Foundation, Carrie Kirshner.
If you look at Sarasota with the number of public courses we have available, Bobby Jones is just one of many who's competing for the casual golfer. And it is time really, I think, that the whole assessment of how that property is being used takes place. Too many holes, too much upkeep and maintenance, and really no prospects for it being profitable.
Give us a little bit of anecdotal history. As I say, you have been in this community for a long, long time, and I might add, you are an avid golfer.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit of some anecdotal information of Bobby Jones to give our viewers some perspective.
Yeah, you know, there are people now that are claiming that Bobby Jones is a historical venue and that, you know, it needs to be recreated. Well, in truth, it's not. And it's not the Donald Ross golf course of this area. That is the old Whitfield Country Club, which is now Sarah Bay Country Club, where Bobby Jones was a salesman for all the property around the course for Adair Realty out of Atlanta. The city of Sarasota literally bought the plans as a mail-away type of situation in building the golf course. And naming the course Bobby Jones, the city actually bought Bobby Jones a new car for him to come in and inaugurate the course and use his name as the Bobby Jones Golf Course. So over the years, the course, the footprint grew. Historically, there was a problem of irrigation, which was somehow addressed with using a treated effluent, and it's always had maintenance conditional problems in the greens and also in drainage. So, you know, it's not an easy fix.
Say you're on the city commission, what would you do? What do you think needs to happen with all the options that are being presented? Where would you go with this?
Well, I think there's the ability to keep 18 holes of golf, if in fact that's the concern. But I think there should be some other associated use for the rest of the property. It certainly seems to me that the conservancy idea of the property in a park-type setting would really be appropriate. I really think the irony of this whole thing is the Royal and Ancient Golf Club in Dunfermline, Scotland, who people see at the British Open, is not the owner of that club, but the town of Dunfermline, which is Sarasota's sister city.
That's right.
And the irony of it is that on Sundays the course is closed for the public to use the course as a park.
As you know, there's lots of talk about converting this land into a conservation easement. We have 300 acres. This is a powerful land use decision that is going to be made in the next few months. What is your take on that as to what are some of the parts that we could have in those acres?
There's all sorts of things, but you know, I think we're only limited by, you know, how imaginative we can be as to what we do with that land. But to keep it as a public trust, you know, some people say, oh, we should use it as affordable housing. Well, unfortunately, affordable housing doesn't stay affordable.
You know, it's interesting. This could very well be, when I look at all the issues that we've dealt with certainly in my tenure on the commission, but in the last many, many years, what has brought us to consensus? We seem to be a non-consensus community when it comes to major decisions, land use decisions, large land use decisions. We go through this all the time. There's this side and there's that side. There's the development community versus the neighborhood communities. Could this be the one? Could Bobby Jones be the one that brings us all together and have true consensus and meet everybody's needs?
Well, I think it could. I think the recognition, though, is that Sarasota, in order to keep its character, has to maintain, you know, some of the things it has. We don't have to be Disney World to everybody. We don't have to be, you know, a place that has multiple golf courses for everybody. You know, we have to really think about, you know, how we appeal to the majority of people and how we keep the character of the community.
And that goes to, is it politically viable if it's going to bring everybody together? Because it comes down to politics when you're making these decisions.
Well, I think in this case, this you know, the way it's certainly being discussed is something that the taxpayers would also see a great benefit to.
Absolutely.
You know, I think the golfers, if 18 holes is maintained and upgraded to a much better configuration than any of the tracks are now, you know, the golfers should be pleased. This is, again, not to, you know, how many thousands of golfers can we put on that track, but really what's the quality of the track. And if you more concerned with that and the broad land use and the affordability of it, I think everybody should get on board.
Interestingly, many of the same issues Kerry dealt with during his tenure on the City Commission remain present today. Few know that better than our next guest, City Manager Tom Barwin.
As we began the renovation process and got into the details, we really began to understand what a huge environmental role this property plays, not just to the city, but to the whole region. And there is property that drains here all the way from the UTC Mall. The storm drainage drains all the way from the UTC Mall. So when we began to look at the engineering and the course renovation architect's plans, you know, there's almost $2 million worth of pure environmental improvements just to help purify the stormwater. But then the deeper we got into this, and I had the Audubon Society audit the property. There are over 45 species of birds. There are hundreds and hundreds of trees on the property. So it really plays a triple role. Provides urban wildlife habitat, helps us retain and cleanse stormwater runoff, and then of course the trees eat the carbon. So it's a huge environmental role. And some of the focus began to move in that direction, to understand that and how important it was to keep this asset in play in perpetuity.
So how do you think public opinion is going to evolve over this? I know it's a hard question in terms of support.
Well, what's really, I think, driven some of the creativity and looking for new options has been the business plan. In their wisdom, the City Commission, well, giving preliminary direction to renovate the whole 45 holes. And personally reading the tea leaves, I think a lot of that motivation was to be able to preserve the property. So whatever we do, I think has to consider the long-term preservation of the property, at least with this City Commission during these times. But the Commission also asked for a business plan to be developed. And when we factor in the borrowing we'll have to do to renovate a full 45 holes and paying off those bond payments, to make a long story short, it looks like we'll have about $1 million deficit for most of the next 15 years, give or take a little bit. So the thinking has become, is there a way to design and organize this project where it won't require such a heavy subsidy? And although we may be able to do it, and we do subsidize many of our parks and much of our recreational and our natural environment activities, the Bobby Jones Golf Club is an enterprise fund, and in theory, the golfers are supposed to be paying for the costs of the operations. So then you have a challenging situation. So it created a new dimension to try to take a healthy look at this, to see if there's a way to do it where it can be sustainable forever, both whatever golfing will take place there and maintenance of the whole 300 acres.
So do you get the impression, I know this is obviously, as you said, a moving project that's going to take a while, but who may not be on board? Who would need to be convinced of all this?
Well, as is true in many issues around our great community, you have neighborhood interests who I think are very much supportive of keeping that 300 acres undeveloped. You have those who have a certain philosophical view of life and economics, that government should never subsidize anything and government should be minimized, so let's sell off some of Bobby Jones. There have been many letters to the editor that have suggested we sell off chunks of the property to pay for whatever renovation is necessary. And then we have golfers, and the people have just enjoyed and loved that course over the years, and they want it to be affordable municipal golf. And then of course there's the environmental issues. We're dealing with red tide and the bay and how to keep the water clean, and nitrogen is a factor. Heating air temperatures and heating water temperatures are believed to be an aggregating factor to red tide, taking it way beyond any of its historical levels. And we've got climate change and sea levels rising, and what do we do to address that? And one of the answers is plant as many trees as you can to eat the carbon up. So if any community ought to be sensitive to these realities and perhaps a leader in dealing with climate issues, it's our coastal communities. So, you know, that's a part of this discussion, and that's a huge issue in this city. And of course, parks and open space, people just love, and when you look at the growth in Florida and the projections and the demographic trends, it appears we're going to continue to grow as a region and as a state for the foreseeable future. So over time, open space is going to become priceless.
Bobby Jones has been talked about for years and years and years about what to do financially and everything. It's come to this. It's quite exciting. What do you see as the legacy of all this?
Well, I think some of this, Suzanne, began when you were on the City Commission.
Yes.
There's been, you know, we went through the Great Recession, and what we sacrificed during that Great Recession was basically a parks and landscaping division. And since the Great Recession is sunset, the city commissions have been consistent in rebuilding the parks department And we've taken 5 parks back from the city, and we've improved the operations in all of them.
Right.
And we're installing multi-use trails that have been on the books for years. The bayfront's under redevelopment. And this community is evolving, and maybe it always has been partially about this, but it's really about quality of life, okay? People come here, of course, for the weather much of the year and the natural beauty. We've had that cultural arts foundation dating back to the Ringling days. But really what is blossoming now is quality of life and longevity. People are moving to town so they can walk around. People are, you know, people were surprised such a huge majority voted for the Legacy Trail.
Sure.
And we have young people coming to our city commission meetings talking about the importance of preserving our environment for their lives. And so this sort of naturally fits in with all of that. It's kind of a continuation or a morphing, what I would say, to kind of get our priorities right. And they really have to be centered around the environment and environmental preservation and quality of life here. And this delivers on all fronts.
Great way to put it, all fronts, that so much about, and that's why I think this is very exciting. This Bobby Jones has been in the news for many, many reasons, and to now tie this in with the environment, conservation, easements, all that. I mean, I just think it's very, very exciting. I'm always wondering what would be the pushback. I always look at the other side. Are there people saying we need 45? We need, some people will come in and say, we want more investment. That's precious land. Don't you want to make money, city manager? Don't you want revenue coming into the city from something like affordable housing up there? There are all kinds of questions coming in, but it's good that it's and exciting that people are talking about it. What can we do up there?
Well, the last two or three city commissions, the one you've been on, virtually all of them have said, let's protect this property. And this current city commission is saying the same thing. So now we've actually figured out a way to do it. Put it in a conservation easement in perpetuity, so it's there forever. And some of the critics of the strategy are saying, but you're going to tie the hands of future city commissions. Well, that's the idea, actually. We're following through on the direction the last 2 or 3 city commissions have been leading us toward, and we're listening. And of course, we now see all the development, and there's some pushback against overdevelopment in Florida, mostly because of traffic, not so much because of the people, but because of traffic, all of which, you know, would lead logical people to say, how are we going to manage it? And you know, you got to preserve your open spaces, and we would actually like to add to our open spaces in our park inventory, and I think that's what we're planning on. We have a new Parks Master Plan, and so all indications are moving in this direction. But the big compromise will be how many holes of golf should you build? Yeah,
we got to look at the golf part of it, right?
And we've got a range of from 45, you know, steady as we go, to maybe, let's certainly do the original 18. Maybe we can justify 9. Some want 36. So what's the magic number? And we're kind of backing our way into this.
Well, exactly. That's a great way to look at it.
But in exchange for entering the property into the conservation district, the strategy is to not sell it, but monetize the property for the heavy-duty environmental work that it's doing and that it can do, and to see if we can get an interest from the public and the environmental community and the preservationist community and the quality of life community to help us shoulder that burden in perpetuity. So the idea is to really figure out what the value of that environmental role is, raise the funding, in exchange, park it in that conservation easement and create an endowment that will help this generation and future generations manage the property.
As the city manager points out, the concept of conservation and stewardship of our parks is essential. Our next guest understands the value of land conservation and believes in the synergy between golf courses and the environment. President of the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast, Christine Johnson.
Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast is an accredited land trust, which is a big deal. There's only 5 in the state of Florida, and we're the only one south of Tampa. So it's important for us to have the financial means to protect that conservation easement forever, because the conservation easement is there forever. Case in point, how we have endowed our stewardship of those conservation easements with the other municipalities have been through government grants as well as private fundraising. Each land conservation project is completely unique. And Bobby Jones, of course, fits right in there. I think if you could point to any city that you think is well designed, any citizen points to any city in the country or the world that they believe is well designed, we will be able to point to a city that has well designed and thought out places for public use. And that's where city designers start, is what do we have naturally that is a benefit and asset to the citizens that live there, as well as the tourists that want to come and visit. So if you look at London and New York and even LA, you will find that they have good design or good places for people to congregate, get outside, enjoy nature, as well as perhaps recreate and exercise. Having that design and having those places increases the property value around it. And even the data has shown time and again anywhere from 10 to 20% of the value of the property surrounding or within a 1-mile walking radius of that property have increases, like I said, 10 to 20% of those values. We've seen that here in Sarasota, right? When we put in the Legacy Trail, all of the properties that butt up to the Legacy Trail, as well as ones that are within walking distance, that's the #1 selling feature that they place. So what I say to people who think that we are taking things off the property roll, that we're reducing the city or the county's ability to have revenue coming in from property taxes, I say the accumulated price of the increase in value of those lands that are within a 1-mile walking radius more than take up for that. Furthermore, you can point in this area to places that have become destinations in and of themselves. Think celery fields.
Sure, sure. Oh, absolutely. I hike at the celery fields all the time and think about that. It's interesting because we all talk about affordable housing on the Bobby Jones property. It wouldn't be affordable for long. I hear that it would gentrify. And because people want those type of environmental, talk a little bit about ecotourism. That's a word that was floated around many, many years ago. Is that still a viable, prominent word to use?
It's the #1 reason why tourists come to Sarasota.
Well, how does that fly in the face? People will say, well, we're known for arts and culture. So how does that
The
work together?
data has shown that people come here, #1 reason is for the beaches, which I would argue is the environment. If the beaches aren't clean, if we have bad water, people aren't going to come. So that's environment. And #2 reason they come is because of what they can do outside during the day. Think Mayaca State Park, celery fields. #3 reason, close second to, but third reason is our arts and culture. But if you combine all 3 of those, the #1 reason why they come is so that they can do wonderful activities outside during the day and wonderful activities indoors for arts and culture at night. It's those 2 things combined that drive the tourism in our county.
So if you get what is needed to make this all happen, how much land would be put aside? How do you determine that, the Conservation Foundation?
Every conservation easement is unique. And so right now we're in the process of negotiating. Right now we're in the process of researching what is there environmentally. So right now there's over 300 acres of Bobby Jones Golf Club. Will all 300 plus be in conservation easement? I don't know. We have to decide that. And you start first with what are the assets, the environmental assets that are there now. And there's a catchphrase that's being used now in development called ecosystem services. And Bobby Jones has significant ecosystem services. Let me give you an example. Water flows through that property, not only on the surface, but as well in the canals and in the streams. And Bobby Jones holds that water, and it cleans that water. That's an ecosystem service. If it's not there and it is left to be developed, what happens to that water? It causes flooding downstream, and of course that water doesn't have good high quality to it. So that's an ecosystem service. Another ecosystem service is people everywhere are familiar with how trees clean the air. When you think 300 plus acres of trees cleaning and providing good air quality for Sarasota. So we also need to think about that. So when we look at the conservation easement, we say, how are we going to conserve what's important here? We need to first understand what is there. And so we're in that process. Somewhere between 0 and 300 plus acres are going to be conserved. And we'll figure out why first, we'll figure out what first, and then why second, and then how third.
Let's look at the topography of the golf course. Assume there are 18 holes. How does that work with conservation? That how would you manage that if we went from 45 to 18? How would that work?
That has yet to be decided, but let's just look at what other places have done. The birthplace of golf. If you were to go to Scotland and you were to play some of their famous courses, you would find people picnicking alongside the greens. You would find people going on hikes in the roughs. So it's been done, and it can be done. So for people to enjoy both golfing as well as recreation. Ecotourism, same kind of thing. I would imagine people are going to want to bird watch. Bird watching here in Sarasota County brings in more money and people stay longer than the golfers do. So why not put those two things together? We already know we have endangered birds on the property. So let's make it an ecotourism site for bird watchers. That can happen with cohabitation of golfers because we know it's been done elsewhere. And we also look at, for instance, water hazards. Water hazards are really in Florida stormwater retention ponds. And they're better than stormwater retention ponds. So how can we make those water hazards actually function like wetlands do in the natural world? And then when they do, they bring more wildlife, which makes golfers want to play the course, as well as brings people who want to view that wildlife.
Finally, what is your vision for the future of Sarasota? You've touched on a lot of things, but where do you see the next 5, 10, 20 years?
This is an exciting topic for Conservation Foundation because we do think long-term, because we have to be here forever. And our vision for Sarasota County is where the citizens are informed about and absolutely desire the public open spaces. So that's why we've participated with extending the Legacy Trail and had a hand in that. That's why we are trying to conserve over almost 6,000 acres down in Northport, Orange Hammock Ranch, so that we have citizens who know the importance of conservation and the importance of natural places, but as well can get on those natural places and enjoy what we have here. So I see, for the city of Sarasota, as well as the county of Sarasota, more places for people to get together, recreate outdoors, and enjoy.
Ecotourism, conservation, the next generation of golfers. I think Bobby Jones would find all these admirable goals for the future of the course that bears his name. And finally, I too have fond memories of Bobby Jones. Here I am getting a lesson from longtime PGA pro Christian Martin. One of the great things about this place is the dedicated staff and the friendly, welcoming experience, even for beginners like me. To contact Bobby Jones, go to their website, bobbyjonesgolfclub.com. And as always, you can watch this episode and all our past shows at suzanneatwell.org or on my Facebook and YouTube pages. Well, that wraps up another one. I hope you learned something and enjoyed the show. We appreciate you watching. So, until next time, I'm Suzanne Atwell, and we'll see you around town.